Hey girls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be a weekly reading vlog. It is Monday, July 12th. I'm actually starting a weekly reading vlog on a Monday, so already starting off the week on a good note there. Normally I stretch it out in the week. I definitely kind of play with the kind of limitations of what a weekly reading vlog is. It's very rare for them to start at the beginning of the week, but I did have a lot of inspiration to start this weekly reading vlog at the beginning of the week, and just as well, I have been kind of toning down on videos as I get more invested in work and just my life has been busier that way. However, I wanted to kind of do like an impromptu reading vlog. I've been trying to do at least one a month, but this week I've been reading some really wonderful books and I feel like I'll want to vlog my kind of journey through them because I have a feeling one, if not both of the books that I'm reading right now could become a new favorite of all time. So if you watched my last video, which was my Summerween reading vlog, which did not turn out as well as I would have liked, had a lot of personal and car issues happening last week. So if you've seen that video, you know which books I'm going to be talking about because I am extending that readathon. Not really extending it, but just finishing up some books that I was reading throughout the course of that readathon. So my two current reads, my two main reads at the moment is number one, In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. This is one that I wanted to get to in the month of June and I just didn't get around to it, but my library finally came in with a copy of the audiobook and I have been really enjoying it. So I'm about 68% of the way through this one. I am really enjoying it so far. It is a like dark, I would say horror fantasy, just because the blood magic and the death magic is like, they're the two main magic systems, and the way that magic is acquired and passed to people is very dark. It has a lot to do with like death and the afterlife and ghosts and spirits as like conduits for magic. So there are like a lot of very like horror-esque type of kind of concepts here. So it is a darker fantasy. I'm really enjoying it. So the main premise of this one is our main character Rowan is a pansexual blood mage who has to reluctantly team up with an undead spirit who is supposed to be her enemy to start a rebellion against the living and the dead to save both realms from several things that are impacting the future of both the living and the dead worlds. Very wonderful, very creepy. Like I mentioned, we have blood magic where the characters inherit magic through bloodlines, and there are certain runes that you draw to access this blood magic with your own blood, and the longer your bloodline is, the more powerful you are. That's passed down when the current owner of the bloodline in your family decides to pass on and pass that magic down to the next generation. So that's that blood magic. And then we also have death magic, which only a select few can use, and also a select number of spirits that are brought back from the dead to also kind of oversee blood mages and blood magic and are kind of bound to them and control their magic in this world. Very interesting, very in-depth, kind of just scratching the surface. I like all of the tensions that are in this one, but I think a large part of this plot is it would be spoilery because I feel like it starts off as one thing and you find out so many mysteries about this world and what is happening that I don't want to give too much away. I'm really enjoying it. If you like very headstrong protagonists who maybe don't always do the best things, or they do the best things but not in like the smartest of ways, they like definitely act before they think, that's definitely Rowan. I really enjoy her point of view. She's put in some terrible situations and she's so spirited. She doesn't really let that dampen her spirit, and she is a fighter. I'm really enjoying that, as well as this book has some great representation. Like I mentioned before, our main character is pansexual. She's also in a polyamorous relationship, which is talked about and explored in the book as well. We have a main character who's lesbian. We have a main character who is non-binary and I believe asexual or aromantic. That one wasn't too clarified, but the character was talking about something on that aro-ace spectrum. I want to say the non-binary character is asexual and either pan or bi romantic. There is a conversation between three of the main characters talking about their preferences and their feelings towards other people. There aren't any labels specified, which is why I'm like kind of waffling back and forth on a few. I know Roven identifies as pansexual specifically because that is what the author has in their blurb of this book, but the other two are up for interpretation. Not interpretation, but just I feel like there are several labels, especially with our non-binary main character, what labels they might prefer. So it is set in a world without homophobia, and so those identities are not a problem for the characters so much, but there is a heavy emphasis on hereditary blood magic, and you have to pass your bloodline and your blood magic down from parent to child. So that does cause some barriers. For example, like our lesbian main character is not interested in men, but she is expected to pass on the bloodline. So, you know, there is some tension in terms of just royal marriages, royal bloodlines, things like that, but it's not necessarily out of homophobia, if that makes sense. For example, like if our main characters would be in different situations, there wouldn't be any conflict about who they would be attracted to. So just wanted to clarify that, because I know I, like a lot of other people, don't really want to read fantasy with queer characters if it's just going to be a fantasy that is so fantastical, has dragons, has magic, but there's still homophobia. Definitely not like a fun experience, you know? It is already something that is still prevalent in our life. So if we're reading fantasy for escapism, you know, sometimes you don't want a heavy read, at least in terms of that being one of the main challenges for our main characters. So that's really lovely. I do like it was a whole dedicated chapter where these characters are kind of discussing their likes and dislikes and preferences with each other, and just their different identities. So I did really like that. I thought that was done really well, in a way that really like helped build the characterization of the characters. But yeah, the love triangle that is happening is very, very nice. I don't know if we'd call it a love triangle even, between our main character and the main character's two love interests, which are not opposing each other, because that is the great thing about polyamory. But the two love interests, it's like a brief enemies, two friends, mostly friends, two lovers, and then just kind of like in between, like friends to benefits to lovers, that sort of thing. And then the other one is enemies to lovers. So lots of fun relationship dynamics happening there. That's the first book I want to finish. I would love to finish it today. I'm listening to the audiobook. I have about 5 hours left, so definitely doable today. I just don't know if I'm going to read that much today. And then my other book that I am in the middle of right now is The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I'm about a fourth of the way through this one, and I am really, really loving it. Thank goodness, this was one of my most anticipated releases of the whole entire year for fans of S.A. Chakraborty and R.F. Kuang, other writers that I really respect or am really looking forward to their works. Andrea Stewart, Shelley Parker Chan, Chloe Gong. This book has been blurbed by a great number of authors that I've either read their work and really loved, or just really respect them as authors and trust them in terms of their recommendations. And so far, this book is awesome. It's just, I can tell it's going to be like a new favorite series for me, and it was one of those where pretty much immediately by the first chapter I was so hooked. It is such a unique world and slight magic system. We don't really know too much about it, but it is the first book in the Burning Kingdoms trilogy. I believe it's going to be a trilogy. We're following a rogue princess who's trying to topple the throne and fight against her brother for rule. He's an unfit ruler and kind of a despot, but she does not have a lot of political power because she's been punished for her sentiments before. And then we're also following a priestess who kind of has like this found family and also like finding herself aspect going on as well. Together, the two of them are going to eventually team up and try and topple this empire. I am really enjoying it. It is multi point of view. I believe so far we've had about 3 or 4 points of view, and I think some of them it's going to be one of those epic fantasies where sometimes you might just get like one chapter from a character's point of view and then move on just so you can get context for the story. It is very political as well so far. There's a lot of world building, a lot of lore building, a lot of history building as well, because the history of this empire is very important. I'd say the main character that we've spent the most time with so far is Priya, and she is the priestess type of character, and she is one of those character archetypes that I really enjoy in fiction. She's very selfless in an idealistic sort of way, but she's also very much, at least when it comes to this, very much a realist when it comes to things. So she does like try and help people whenever she can, but she's not like so naive to think that all the world's problem solving would be easy. But I'm really enjoying her point of view. The other points of view I just haven't had as much time with, but I'm not very far into this book at all. I am really enjoying it. I'm really excited to read more from this author. I believe they have a duology of books before this one, so I might end up reading that later on this year, depending on how much I love this one and how long the wait for the second book in this trilogy will be. Yeah, the blurb on the front from S.A. Chakraborty is a fiercely and unapologetically feminist tale of endurance and revolution set against a gorgeous, unique, magical world. It is also sapphic, so lots of things that I love in books and also love in fantasy. I'm very excited. I think it's been a while since I've really read like a book based solely on revolution. I really do like a good revolution trope and dismantling the system trope. A lot of my favorite book series have to do with this trope. I think in some aspects of fantasy, it's a very common trope used, but I really tend to enjoy it, especially when done well. So those are the 2 books that I am very much looking forward to reading and finishing this week. Again, one or both of them might be new favorites for me, especially I'm getting really good vibes from the Jasmine Throne. So I'm very excited to continue with both of them, but that is going to be like my introductory sort of clip to this reading vlog. Very excited about what I'm reading. It is my day off today, one of my days off today, so I have plenty of time to read, start this week off on a good reading note, and that's going to be pretty much it. We'll see how many pages that I can read today on my day off, and I will talk to you all later. welcome back to the vlog. I'm just here to give a little reading update about the wonderful books that I am reading, and also a mail update. A really awesome package came in the mail today. Very excited about it. But yeah, all in due time. We're gonna talk about the books that I'm currently going through. So my audiobook, the book that I am closest to finishing at the moment, In the Ravenous Dark by Strickland. I am 80% of the way through this one, and I am very much enjoying it. It is definitely one of those books where I was excited for the original premise, and then reading it and finding out there's so much more than what like the little blurbs or the dust jacket says. I'm very excited to see where the story is going. I thought I was almost done with it, and then there were some twists and turns, and I'm very excited to see what is left in like the last 20% of this book. I'm very much enjoying my time. I am really enjoying the audiobook, and it is overall just a really good time. I've said it before, I think even in this vlog, I'm not sure, but I will say it again. This is like the perfect dark fantasy. I would highly recommend it for like the fall. There are so many dark, sort of horror-esque elements to this one that are just so good. I wouldn't call it grim dark. It's definitely more of like a fantasy horror, and I feel like it's lighter than grim dark, even though it is a very darker sort of fantasy. Almost like, I would say, if you've ever read the Lock and Key comic book series, it is dark. I would also call that horror fantasy, and I just think they're a little bit different than grimdark. Hopefully that makes sense. I just know I don't want any like really hardcore grimdark fantasy fans to go into this one, because I don't think it is, but it definitely has some very horrific elements in terms of like the magic system and the world system and some of the things that are happening. Just like this society is very obsessed with death and certain types of magic. Like I mentioned before, there's blood magic and death magic, so very much enjoying that. I hopefully am going to finish it today. I actually think it is my day off of work, so I think I'm actually going to go to like my apartment complex's gym and just kind of walk on the treadmill a little bit and listen to a good chunk of the audiobook, because I would like to finish it today. It is really good. I'm enjoying my time. And then my other book that I am currently reading, which I am also really loving, this is just a really good reading week for me, is going to be The Jasmine by Tasha Suri. I want to say I'm almost halfway through this one. I'm on page 200 or so out of like 530. What is cool about this is that there is like a lot of extra bonus content in the back. Like, not only is it like there's a cast of characters, which is really nice for an expansive fantasy book, but there's also extras from Tor that give like little chapter samplings of For the Wolf by Hannah Witten, which was a book that's not on my radar, but I might enjoy it. And then also The Unbroken by C.L. Clark. There's like a chapter sampler in there too. Side note, I'm excited to see those afterwards. I actually think that's kind of cool. I feel like that's something that used to be really big in books, but isn't anymore. I definitely haven't seen it in like a brand new fantasy book, where I think it's usually in like paperback reprintings that they'll offer like exclusive looks at other books. Like, it's not even books in this series. Very interesting. Anyway, that little side tangent to say that I feel like I'm closer to halfway through this one than it looks like when you look at this, because of that extra content in the back. But I'm really enjoying this. We're definitely starting to see the setup, and I will say, reading the dust jacket for this one, I probably wouldn't recommend, except for there's like a blurb of like the main synopsis. You can read that. If you read the rest of the dust jacket, we're just now getting to that point, like that synopsis point in this book, with like over 200 pages in. We're just starting the starting action, if you will. This is very character driven. It does take its time setting up this really complex, this is going to be, I feel like, a very political series in terms of conflict and just setting up, explaining the world and explaining previous wars and conflicts that give context for the things that are happening in this book, as well as a pretty interesting magic system, which we haven't really seen fleshed out too much, that definitely has to do with like religion in this book. So a lot of concepts. I love a slower paced fantasy. I really really enjoy like a slower, more political fantasy as well. So I would definitely say this counts as that. So keep that in mind if you want to pick up the Jasmine Throne, but I am really enjoying it. I feel like this is definitely going to be a book where I can't tell if we're supposed to like the characters or not. They all have potential to be likable, but they do some like very unlikable things. But I feel like in this society, lots of the characters that we're following, because of like the society they're in and their kind of caste system and their position in society, they're backed up against the wall trying to do what is best for them. And we see that in a lot of these characters. There's like talks of rebellion and revolution, and for a lot of characters that's obviously not going to be a priority for someone who's struggling to put food on the table for themselves and their family, which I think those conversations are really interesting. But seeing kind of these, I would say likable, I definitely tend to like unlikable characters. I think they're interesting. But seeing these characters in difficult, you lose either decision you make sort of situations, and I'm just very intrigued to see where this book is going to go. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm so glad because I've been hyping this book up for a very long time. It was one of my most anticipated fantasy releases of this year, and yeah, I'm very glad that at least for me it is living up to the hype that I was placing upon it. Now, speaking of hype, one of my most anticipated releases as well came in the mail today. It was a pre-order. Very excited to pick it up. I'll probably pick it up at like the end of this month. I would love to save it for more like September, October, but I'm gonna be honest, I just think that I'll be way too excited to pick it up sooner rather than later. So definitely probably like end of July, early August for this read. But The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix came in the mail today. Very excited. I am very excited to pick this one up. This is another book that is one of my most anticipated releases of this year. I feel like July, August, September, October, like that stretch of time is when most of my most anticipated releases are coming out. So many good books coming out. So excited. I've been very excited to get to this one. Definitely anticipating it in a different way than I was anticipating the Jasmine Throne, because I've never read anything by this author. I just thought the premise sounded so fascinating. Grady Hendrix, I think I have read every single one of his full-length books. Let me just double check, because I know he has like Paperbacks from Hell, which is kind of like a nonfiction about paperback books from like the 70s and 80s, like Pulp Fiction. I haven't read that yet, but I have read Horror Store, My Best Friend's Exorcism, We Sold Our Souls, and the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. So I have read all of those. I have also really enjoyed all of those, so I was really excited to pick this one up. I really like Grady Hendrix writes really good like horror commentary that isn't just like critiquing and like pointing out tropes inside of the genre, but it's also like effective horror on its own, which I really enjoy. I just think his books are great. As a horror fan, I simultaneously both really love the final girl trope, but also recognize there's like, can be, especially with like earlier works from a different time, lots of critiques and lots of things to say about that trope, and maybe it not necessarily being, you know, the best. As a horror fan, I do love the final girls trope. However, you know, if you really dive into it, there are a lot of things which, you know, don't really stand up. It can definitely be a little bit problematic depending on what kind of media you're consuming. Very tropey at times with who the final girl is and how that is chosen and all of that, but I do have a soft spot for the final girl trope when it's done well, as I expect a lot of different horror fans do. It's a very endearing and a very popular trope for a lot of reasons. So I am just very, very excited to pick this book up. Grady Hendrix books are genuinely like terrifying. There are some genuinely scary scenes in all of them, as well as just the horror tropes it explores at the same time. It's always such a wonderful reading experience for me. Definitely like Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires I read last year, and it was a very effective horror for me because of like the tropes of the husbands gaslighting their wives, and that's just like something that's very effective for me in horror. Rosemary's Baby I think does it really well too, because honestly I'm not too scared of ghosts in like real life. I think real life is scarier than like the monsters that we create and all of that. So I thought that was very effective, and I'm sure just based on the trope, this is gonna have a lot of good things to say as well. And on the back, we've got a lot of really good authors blurbing this on the back, but Paul Tremblay, another really good horror author, says, take slasher movie adoration, critique, and satire, mix it with compelling, flawed characters and neck-breaking plot twists, and drop it all into an industrial blender. Now you have this maniacally clever and compulsively readable book. So I'm very excited to pick this up, yeah, sometime soon. But that is pretty much my reading update. I think I should be able to finish in the Ravenous arc today, as well as make some headway on the Jasmine throne. If I wanted to, I feel like I could sit down and really power through this a lot faster than I have been, but just because it is so slower paced, it has a lot of political components to it, and I really don't want to miss anything about the world building and just development of this world and political system and magical system. I have been going through this one very slow, but not because I'm not enjoying it. I feel like there are definitely two different types of new favorites for me. There are books that like I cannot put down, that I just race through because I want to see what happens at the end. I just want to absorb it as fast as possible. And then also we have favorites where I read it so slowly because I just want to savor every single minute. This is definitely the latter of those. So I will be making progress in this one. Hopefully I can finish it by the end of this week, but if not, that's okay. I'm really enjoying my reading experience. But that is really all I have for this reading update. I might go read some Jasmine Throne, I'm feeling right now, and maybe put on like a Marvel movie in the background, probably Winter Soldier. I went and saw Black Widow like the second night it came out, I believe. Saw it like on Saturday. I think it came out on a Friday, and I really loved it. I'll have to rewatch it to definitively place it on my list of favorite Marvel movies, but I feel like it could be a top 5 Marvel movie for me. I really enjoyed it, and that is definitely a surprise coming from the fact that I was never a big Black Widow fan. In the movies, I had a lot of issues with how she was portrayed and like the constant changing up and sacrificing of her character arc for different characters, different male characters. So like honestly, I wasn't really looking forward to this movie. So it was definitely a surprise when I watched it. I will say I was definitely a person that before watching this movie was just kind of frustrated with the whole fact that this movie should have happened a long time ago. Black Widow as a character should have had her own standalone movie a long time before this, but at the same time, without spoiling it too much, because by the time this vlog comes out, it still will have been a fairly recent movie to come out, but all I'll say is I'm not glad it took so long for Black Widow to get her own movie. I think the character deserved one long before now, but I am glad that it took this long because I would not have wanted to see a Black Widow movie the way she was portrayed in like original Avengers or like Age of Ultron era. I'm very glad they took their time and got the right people to do this project. So I really enjoyed it. If like the mini series and this movie is any indicator of like what the Marvel Cinematic Universe looks like going forward, I'm very excited. Yeah, just like a brief little Marvel tangent, but ever since I watched Black Widow, I am just on such a big Marvel kick and kind of craving watching a movie, but I'm also craving reading a book. So I'll probably put on one of my favorite Marvel movies that I've seen a bunch of times that I don't have to focus on too much and that I can read to. So that is my plan for the rest of my day off. I'm going to get to reading and I will talk to you all later. morning, friends. Happy weekend. It is Saturday and we're filming from a little bit of a different location today. Same room, my bookshelves are just over there, and I normally film my vlog updates and videos in front of them, but this is my recliner chair, still in my own little personal library here. Just thought I'd do a quick reading update. I was already reading in this location, so I figured might as well do an update here. But I do have several reading updates for you. First and foremost, I did finish In the Ravenous Dark by Strickland. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was very great, dark, horror-esque sort of fantasy. I would say this is probably new adult. I think it fits very comfortably into that category. Pretty much my biggest takeaway from this and my biggest critique with this book as a whole was just that I wish that it wasn't a standalone, or it just would have had an extra 100 pages. I felt like there were some really cool things done with the world building, and then also some twists and turns at the end of the book that I just would have liked to see develop further than they were, but I did really enjoy it. This is definitely, I would say, more of a character exploration than necessarily the plot exploration. There's definitely a plot, there's definitely a mission and a goal of our main characters, but a lot of it is spent on characterization and exploring how they feel and they fit in with their world. So I'm a very character driven reader, so that's just kind of why I did feel the emotional investment in these characters and I did enjoy them. So I just wanted some more page time with them, but I did really enjoy this book overall. It was a really great audiobook. It was just a really enjoyable read overall, and I am very much looking forward to checking out more by this author. I think they have at least one other book out before this one, and then they're coming out with one next year that's about, I believe, vampires, so very excited for that. So that was pretty much the only fiction book that I have finished this week. Still plugging along with The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I was going to read it last night. Me and my partner did have some drinks last night though, so after we were done drinking, he played video games. My routine normally is reading, but this is just very politically complex, and I really wasn't feeling trying to put all of my brain energy into kind of figuring out more of the political system and the wars and political conflict in there. So I haven't actually picked up too much of this just because last night I was not in the mood for an incredibly complex new fantasy world. So I went ahead and my library holds are getting kind of insane at this point. Definitely one of the perks at a library, or downsides, is that you're around books. You have access to books all the time, and so now I feel I'm just always putting in new holds and getting them in. So I do actually need to read some of my library books as well, so I'm going ahead, and I did pick up Shadow of Night last night. This is by Deborah Harkness. This is the second book in the All Souls trilogy, I believe. It's the Discovery of Witches trilogy. I actually think there's 4 books out now, but I don't think the 4th book is connected to the trilogy. I read A Discovery of Witches last month. I did really enjoy it a lot more than I was anticipating. Last night I only got to chapter 3 in this one, and it's definitely going to be very different than the first book. I feel like the first book definitely, if you love history, if you love history reimaginings or historical fiction, there was a lot to like in that book because Deborah Harkness is a professor of history and has won a lot of awards in her field, and also has written a lot of scholarly work and papers before writing this trilogy. So this one, without giving too much of the plot away of the first book, this one is even more historically based. So I think that would either really cement a lot of readers into liking this series or really lose them, because it's definitely a shift from what you think you're getting into with the first book to this second book. I'm interested to see how this will then kind of conclude and go into a third book, but I am enjoying it. Definitely, I mean, only 30 pages in, it's definitely not what I anticipated at all, really, going into this one. Even though I had just recently read the end of the first book, I kind of thought I knew what we were getting into, but I think the author's area of expertise in her field really shines storylines in this series because, again, without giving spoilers, although it is getting very hard not to, the history elements of this, as it were, I have read a lot of books, seen a lot of movies and TV shows dealing with similar premises. This one, especially when it comes to books, really feels very immersive and very true to the elements that we're talking about in terms of historical fiction. So I'm enjoying it. Two very chunky books. I still have a lot of time this weekend to read them, so that's really all for this update. I just wanted to give a quick update because I had finished a book. I'm working my way through 2 books. I really doubt that I will be able to finish either of them because, like I said, it is Saturday. I'm hoping to finish this vlog up on Sunday. And not only are the 2 books that I'm reading very like chunky in page count, that's not so intimidating. It's just that the fact that one is a very political and like military based fantasy, which tend to be a little bit more dense than like fantasy that doesn't focus as much on especially politics. And then the second one is very much like a slower paced. It almost does have a lot to do with some politics as well, I suppose, but also just very researched and very thorough historical fiction sort of feel on that one. So 2 very dense tomes that I am reading this weekend, but I'm very excited to keep reading, and I will check back in with another update later. Welcome to the end of the vlog. Here to wrap up some of my reads, wrap up the vlog in general. I did manage to finish 2 books this week and get started in another one we've already talked about, In the Ravenous Dark by A.M. Strickland. I did really enjoy that one. And then I also finished The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, and this one I absolutely loved. I think it is probably going to be on my list of my favorite books of this year. I really enjoyed it. This is definitely going to be a new favorite series for me, I'm pretty sure, just based on if the other 2 installations, because I do believe it is a trilogy, if they're as strong as this one, then I am very excited to read more in this series. I will say before you pick this one up, if you don't tend to like, it's a little bit military fantasy, not yet at this point. I think it's going to get more as the series goes on, but especially if you do not like slower paced fantasy or really epic political fantasy where there is a lot of political things going on in here, tying in with colonialization and the different powers and privileges of different like nation states within an empire. There's a lot of that going on, a lot of political maneuvering going on, as well as there is a lot of history in this world that is needed to understand the conflicts that are taking place, as well as things like culture and religion from different sects and areas of this empire really play a big role in the conflict that is going on. So this is a slower fantasy and like a very complex fantasy in that way. So if you don't tend to like that fantasy, I definitely probably would just at least know that before going into this one, that this is very slow paced. I haven't really given too much of the synopsis because for big fantasy series, I kind of like to read the first book so I can get a better handle on maybe what would be considered a spoiler and what wouldn't, to give like a very succinct summary of this new series. I will say, if you pick this book up and you read the description in the dust jacket, the events that are happening there, which, you know, technically wouldn't be spoilers since they're in the dust jacket, that does not happen. The majority of that action does not happen until about 200 pages into this one. So very slow paced. I don't think it was poorly paced. It's very intentional in its pacing, and I really do enjoy character-driven stories. But just know that going in, this is following a group of people. I would say I expected there to only be 2 points of view, 2 main protagonists, but we do see several different points of views throughout this book. I would say probably 3 or 4 main ones, and then we do sometimes get like one-off chapters from different characters, or like a couple of different chapters from different characters' point of view. It's all third person, but it's third person limited as you're following different characters in each chapter. So it is very sprawling in that sense as well. We're following a lot of different people as we are navigating this empire on the brink of potential revolution. One of our main characters is a princess who is not in the best standing because her brother has taken the throne and he rules this empire. However, she does not think he is fit to lead, and we see he is a very terribly cruel person. She does not want the empire to end up in his hands, so she actually gets arrested for trying to attempt a coup, and that's where we find her at the beginning of this book, being imprisoned because of these actions. We also follow another character who is a simple handmaiden with a lot more of a mysterious past to play. We follow rebels in different groups. That's what's really interesting about this book, is that it does deal with revolution and follows lots of different people as they kind of try and figure out which best way they want to go. There are different groups of the same rebel group, almost, I would say, where they all want the same thing in terms of liberation for their country. However, they all want to go about it a really different way, and I think it is very fascinating what this book explores in that there are several different ways, and especially most of our main characters, they're in very different classes in the system, so we really explore what options that you really have depending on what caste you're in, on what kind of revolution you can even contribute to, because obviously for some of our poorer characters who are really just working so hard to stay alive, they don't have the same sorts of avenues or even priorities to revolution as like the elite who are also trying to gain independence through, like, writers and poets and philosophers have a very different idea of what revolution means than like these people on like the lowest caste in society. So that's really interesting, exploring those ideas. But we see all of our main characters kind of come together and try and figure out if they can form one big cohesive group, figure out how to best go about. Everyone kind of has different priorities when it comes to revolution and different ways that they think the revolution would best come to pass. So it is very interesting to kind of see what's going to happen in the next books in this series. I'm very excited. I really enjoyed it. It was one of my most anticipated releases for the year, and it definitely did not let me down, which is very exciting. And then the last book that I picked up this week, I did not finish, but I did get a good chunk into. I think I'm about a fifth of the way through this one. I'm on page about 100 or so of Shadow of Night by Deborah Harkness. This is the second book in the All Souls trilogy, and I'm also really enjoying this one. I will say, if you've read Discovery of Witches, it is very, very different than that book in terms of just like action and plot and what is happening. I think if you kind of go into Discovery of Witches knowing a very bare bones synopsis, you would not expect what is happening in this book to be happening. It's very wild, very interesting if you do like history or historical fiction, or even, I have been describing this almost as kind of like the Vampire Chronicles meets like a Dan Brown book, because it very much has that plot of our main characters are looking for artifacts that influence both the past past and the present in like a secret society sort of way, except the secret societies are vampires and witches and demons. So I am enjoying this one. Again, also a slower paced book. I really went with slower paced books this week, and I will say this one was a lot tougher for me initially to get into. We are introduced to a lot of brand new characters that we don't have in the first book all at once, which can be a little overwhelming because it's just so different, the first book from the second book. Definitely, I feel like it would be optimal to read the first book and then go into the second book fairly recently, so you have a lot of knowledge carrying over fresh in your mind. That's what I did. At least I read Discovery of Witches about 3 weeks ago now, and I'm glad that I'm picking this up because it is a lot to take in. It's a very dense book, but I am really enjoying this one so far. And those are like the biggest reading updates that I have. I do have one that's like kind of reading adjacent, not necessarily like a book sort of update, but a bookish update indeed. I recently applied for the Libro FM ALC program, and I'm very excited to announce that I got in. So every month, if you're a part of this program, Libro will offer, it's like 6 or 8 titles that are audiobook arcs, and then just in exchange for those free titles, listen to them, talk about them on social media. It's something that I very much already do. I already use Libro a lot, and just getting additional titles from them to read is very exciting. There's definitely like a wide range of genres for the ALCs. You don't have to pick all of them. You don't have to read all of them. So you can kind of pick and choose which ones are the most interesting to you. So I did get quite a few good books. These top 3 are all my latest ALCs. This one down here, Lights of Prague, is actually one I purchased myself because, like I said earlier, I do actually use this service and really enjoy it. But I did get these 3 titles here, which I'm very excited to read soon. So I'm very excited to be working with this capacity in terms of Libro FM. Nothing really changes on my end because I've already been posting about audiobooks, Libro FM in specific, for a while now, especially on my Instagram. Also talk about it here. Now I just get more titles to talk about, which is very, very exciting. Definitely in like the last couple of weeks, I've been so invigorated to read just because of things like this ALC program, and then I did start a job pretty recently at a library. I am just surrounded by so many books and just surrounded by so many people who love to read, and I kind of hit a little bit of a reading slump in June, not gonna lie. I wanted to read so many more books than I actually ended up reading. However, I am really excited to see what the next couple of months have in terms of my reading, just because I have like a new fresh wind. Very excited to just read a whole bunch of new amazing titles and share them with you. But that is going to be the end of this weekly reading vlog. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, subscribe for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!